Setting up shop.
Hi everyone, welcome back. It's another episode of Setting Up Shop with myself, Dan, a wood turner from the UK, Rasmus, a blacksmith from Norway.
Hello.
Although he's in Sweden at the moment, he's defecting. And Heidi.
Invading.
No, he's defecting. It's defecting. He's defective, something like that. Anyway, and Heidi, a potter from the States.
Hi. Oh.
And none of that's rehearsed. Setting Up Shop is not filmed in front of a live studio audience because it's just too costly, really. How is everyone? Hopefully you are all well. The January blues should have gone by now. We're now in March. Things are moving on. It looks like it's going to be spring. You start getting lots of people asking you why you haven't done anything yet, mostly your partners, and you have to sort of ignore them and shrug that off and go, it's fine. Everything's going to plan. It's not a problem at all. We have metrics, or at least Heidi does.
I try.
So, what are we going to talk about today? What we thought we'd cover today. We thought we would talk a little bit about feedback and critique or criticism. And we're going to talk about this in two different categories. So we are going to start off by talking about the positive side of it, the asked for feedback from your peers, from your family, possibly when you're developing a product or the very first time you've made a thing. You can, and you're going to have that conversation around whether it's easily identifiable, whether or not the cost or the pricing, what it should be, maybe it's too high, too low, and all of that kind of stuff. So as someone who has done a huge amount of product development, Rasmus, I'm going to descend upon you first. Do you have an example where you can think of that you have made a product and then possibly shown it to some peers or family members to discuss whether you think it's going to work, or do you just skip that and just launch it out into the world and hope?
Well, I do recall first time I tried making a batch of knives in school, and I was really proud about them. And I showed them to a woodworking friend of mine, and he basically looked at them and said, well, I guess that's a way of making a knife.
Oh.
Okay, so let's clarify a couple of things here. First of all, what age were you? Because you say you were in school.
No, so this was blacksmithing school, so it's 12 years ago.
Okay, we just needed to make sure for the international listeners and particularly the British listeners with our knife crime problem, what he meant was it's not just the Norwegians allowing him to casually bring knives around at the age of like 14. He was in blacksmithing school, so college we would probably call it, or high school or whatever.
Yeah.
And the second element of it was you took a metal-worked forged item to a woodworking friend, and they were the ones who were saying it looked a bit not quite great, I'm assuming.
And he was right. I mean, I did dig those up because hoarding tendencies. I did have a lot of those knives, and I dug them up like 5 years afterwards, like, oh, yeah, no, these weren't good at all. And then I tried reforging them into something more useful, and still not great.
Cool. Okay, but so just reining that back in a little bit. When he said that to you, did you take it in the manner in which it said? Because that's actually probably quite a polite and quite a nice way of saying they could be better. Yeah,
and that was basically his intention of like, because he had a lot more experience woodworking and looking at these knives with sort of a woodworker's lens. And also he's a good old mate of mine from the Scouts. So like we have grown up using knives a lot. Okay. But just having forged knives for the first time and made like a batch of 7 or something and being really, really proud and then giving them to someone and he's not as enthusiastic, sort of give me that shock of reality and looking at them again and going like, oh, yeah, I see what you mean. But one of those knives is still the knife I use every single day, and that was the one that was savable out of the lot of 7.
Okay. So you'd class that as a positive experience then?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a couple of seconds to sort of internalize it and work through it and go like, yeah, no, you are right. I'm disappointed in myself and not angry at you, kind of.
Okay. So how long before you then went and made your next batch or whatever? Or did you look at the processes and see where you'd gone, or did you practice a certain technique? What was your follow-on?
I honestly don't recall, which might mean it was a while between this event and the next time I tried doing a production run of knives, or actually doing a production run of knives, because this was a week in school when we were learning how to make knives. So of course I weren't supposed to be good doing it the first time.
Yeah.
And probably it was the 7th out of those that I actually kept and I'm still using, not the first one, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay. It's still interesting though that you sort out that level of, even if it wasn't intentional, even if it was like a subliminal thing of you're going to someone who is not close to the project. So it wasn't the teacher at your blacksmithing school. It was outside of it, but someone whose thought process you respected, and you knew there was a level of understanding of the product. And so you sought them out, and they were able to critique it in a manner that didn't cause great offense, but also made it clear to you that if you think these are acceptable, that's great, but I probably wouldn't use one type of conversation.
Yeah. Sort of A for effort, but try again.
Okay, that's cool. That's actually quite a nice, positive thought process at that part of your maker journey. I think that to have that conversation, even if it meant you thought, I need to have a break before I have a go at this again and reassess it. I think that's an important part of understanding what proper critique or feedback is about. Is where are the weaknesses? Do they need to be addressed? How are you going to address them? And actually processing that internally and however you can, working your way through that. And to a certain extent, being able to try and put your emotions to one side for that as well, which can be the hardest part of it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Now, Heidi, I would imagine you've got a lot more experience from, I'll say, almost like the art background side of this, having gone through college and doing. Was it an art degree, or was it?
It was a fine arts degree.
Yeah, fine arts degree. So you would have gone through this process a lot more formally and would they have taught you the point behind it, or did they just go straight in and?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like in my figure drawing class was where I really learned about the art of critique, like how to subjectively look at someone's work and really hone in on, what's working for it, what's not working for it. Identify BS when an artist is presenting their work and they're like trying to slough off like this idea that, it doesn't look good because I was trying to make it look organic. Like the excuses and BS that art students might have to try and get a passing grade. It really allows you to suss out like the people that are really focused on what they're trying to make and why they're trying to make it and trying to get their message out versus people that are just kind of phoning it in to get a grade. I think it's also given me, probably to Ben's chagrin, a more critical eye than what he might want from a partner when he does work. Right. So like if he's really pumped up about something, I have to really be careful to not like identify where something might be a little crooked or, there might be, I see where he made a mess up and tried to hide it, those kind of things. So I fail at hiding those critiques. And the thing is like we get in a little bit of a scuffle about it sometimes where it's like he wants me to be honest with him, but then he doesn't want me to be honest with him. And then I'm like, don't ask me to be honest if you don't want honesty. Right. So more recently he did this snail that it's a like keep going or something in the board where he made it kind of look like the slime from the snail as it was moving on a path. And he used resin to make it. It was beautiful. I didn't have any critiques. I was like, this is awesome. The carving looks really good. It's really well applied. So it doesn't feel like it's going to come apart. It looks really good. And he's like, well, okay, but what more? Like, all right, where's the catch? What's
Yeah.
wrong with it? Like, didn't you see this? And then he starts pointing out,
Yeah.
what he's like. And I'm like, okay, well, either you want me to have a critical eye or you don't want me to have a critical eye. So like in that context, art school helped me to have a critical eye. It helped me to formulate my opinion in a way that was direct, and the purpose of the critique is for improvement, or like, I see this, I have a trained eye, I see this, I can tell you where you can improve upon it or hide it better, or explain to me what happened here, because it's either going to give the piece character or it's going to just shine out like a flaw. Like, being able to speak to those things and try not to be a complete jag off about it, but it's also allowed me to have a open mind when people are like picking up my pieces and going, ooh, like this handle, or the weight of this seems off, or whatever. It's given me a thicker skin. Not to say like I'm immune to feeling bad, but coming from the right people, it's helpful. Like I remember with my pottery, one of the feedbacks that I got earlier on, not like super early on, where it's like, Rasmus, your story of like the first batch of knives or whatever, but it was around my handles. And it was the technique that I was using to make my handles were making the edge of my handles a little sharp. And it was just like a light, like, hey, if you did X, Y, and Z before you attached your handle, number one, it'd be easier to hold your handles, but also they would be less fragile. And I was able to like apply that direct criticism as an improvement on, my workshopping, my handles. So it's not always just about like, does this look good, but does this serve the right function, and can the function be improved? The weight, the shape, how it, sits in your hand, those kind of things. But but fine art school definitely taught me how to have an opinion, how to express that opinion, and how to not just express an opinion, but give guidance on what I think could improve it.
Constructive feedback.
Yes, that's the word.
Yeah. There was something you mentioned which I thought was really interesting in all of that. Not that the rest of it wasn't, but
she's a
specific
bore.
point, which was you made up the point there about being able to identify if in your particular case you're mentioning whether an artist knew why they were making the piece they were making, which obviously in an educational setting it's like there's an assignment, you've got to fulfill an assignment, etc., etc. But I think it's certainly something that resonated with me, because when I was trying to find the path, as we all still are, of what am I going to be known for, or what is the sort of things that I make, are there signature type pieces that are my thing or whatever. And let's say I'd turn a bowl, because a lot of wood turners will turn a bowl. And then I put it out on a market stall. And the number one question I get from people is, what's it for? Which to me seems really weird, because I'm like, it's literally a vessel that you can put things in. There are so many uses for this thing. You can sit and look at it. You can have it on, leave it on a mantelpiece. You can put it on a coffee table. You can use it every day as long as you don't put it in a dishwasher. You can eat food out of it, or you can do this, or you can do that, or whatever. But the reality is the first few times I got asked that question, I hadn't made it with an intention of, this bowl is to be used to eat food out of, let's say. And so therefore the forms that I were using were quite naive. They weren't necessarily very sophisticated or geared towards a specific functionality, which might have helped the customer looking at it go, I recognize what that function is, what the purpose of that vessel is going to be, which can sound very, very sort of artistic and whatever, but the reality of it is any product we use in our house has probably gone through many, many iterations until people are so familiar with it that they go, oh, I know that is a rolling pin, for instance. Okay, stupidly simple shape. It's a cylinder, unless you get a French style, which then does this, or you get one for chapatis, which is very narrow and much longer. But you know that is meant for this type of pastry rolling or whatever, because it's a different shape and style. But they're all the same product. And so I guess what I'm getting at is the whole thing of, we as people who create things, it helps if you know what it's for, why you are making the thing, your craft, your art, or whatever it is you are making. It's quite important, because that will then come across in the finished product,
right?
For people to consider when they're buying it. And I think it does make a difference.
Well, did you start labeling your bowls like, this is for nuts and this is for cereal and this is for
I tried to be a bit
cream.
more subtle about it, and like put sweets in a type of bowl or
okay,
whatever.
so you're like doing a visual effect.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. But I think, I mean, this goes back to something I think we mentioned in season 1, with the greatest respect to them all, the general public, whoever they are not in our little world, right? They're not zoned in. So you have to pretend like they are the dumbest people in the world, and that you have to tell them as many times as possible who you are, what you do, what your things are for. So don't be afraid of like over labeling stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean you want a fruit bowl? Well, let's go to my fruit bowl table, which has a fruit bowl section next to it, and each one is individually called a fruit bowl made from this product. This is a 12-inch fruit bowl, so that you don't have to pick it up and try and work out if it's going to fit in your house. And you can kind of really labor the point, because you've got to try and break through whatever it is going through someone's mind as they've been walking through a marketplace, let's say, or just popped into a shop. They weren't necessarily intending to come straight and see you that morning, so they're not going to have been thinking about it.
Yeah. I think that harkens also back to like early on when we were talking about your booth setup and like having those like environmental setups where it's like, hey, you may not have thought that you could use this product in this way, but here is an example of how that is, and having imagery that supports it too. Like, I think,
and it's worth if you've got a friend of the family, if you're not particularly great yourself, but if you've got a friend of the family, it's halfway decent at taking photos and doing the set dressing kind of thing. Or if you've got the money to pay for a professional photographer, it makes a hell of a difference if you can go, could you do like a, whatever the scene is kind of thing, and you can get that sorted.
Yeah.
And makes a massive difference. So from the point of view then, if we think about asked feedback, I mean, we've kind of all been speaking about talking to peers about this, or other creative people, or people who have had some level of learning or understanding. Have any of you asked family members, like have any of you taken a piece that you've done, perhaps the family just happens to be visiting, and you go, oh, hey, what do you think of this? And you don't give them the context. You don't give them the, I've been working on the, I mean, Rasmus, in your case, I've been working on like the laser cut hook section, and obviously we like Lord of the Rings, and I've managed to do you haven't given the full background. You've just gone, what do you think of this?
Yep.
You guys done that?
Yeah, with varying amounts of success. I mean, the annoying thing is like, well, maybe I've learned to maybe not ask a lot of my family for detailed feedback, but they can be good sometimes to give like a general census of like, am I moving in the right direction with this piece, with this idea? But then there's also the problem of asking my mom for feedback, and she's like, oh yeah, no, it's good. Every single time, no matter what I hand her.
You're my baby. I'm going to tell you everything.
Yeah, so it's like, that's wonderful, but I need to then start to read her reaction to sort of suss out and to look at how she holds it, what she looks at, and then try to suss out like, what is the thing that catches her eye? What can I start to focus on? And like, she is not in our creative world at all.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, she can be like some kind of supportive analog for like the general public, but she doesn't actually she's not actually able to give me any information by herself. I need to sort of decipher her cues or something.
Yeah. I had the same with my dad when I gave him one of my, I think it was the first large bowl that I'd turned, but like the form was really, it was very dog bowly. It was like really straight side because I wasn't confident at like shaping it or anything.
Yeah.
But it was hollowed out. It was polished really nicely. It was shiny. It was like a piece of rippled pear. It was like a nice piece of wood. And I had decided that I was going to gift this to him as a Christmas present, bearing in mind at the time that he was living on his own and he had no need for a fruit bowl that was large enough for a family of 4. You know, like I had made all these decisions, and he opened it and he says, "Oh, thank you. That's very nice." And he was super polite, and then he put it on his table. And I think I came back a year later and it was still on his table with still nothing in it. Because reality was he liked it, you know, he wasn't going to throw it away. But the response that I was hoping for wasn't there. You know, I'm not sure if I mentioned it on here before, but one of my things, like the key factor that brings me joy about creating is seeing that like Christmas present moment when someone sees your stall and they go, you know, the eyes light up because they're like, this is the kind of stuff I've been looking for. Like, this is the sort of thing I want, or, oh, this would be amazing. I've got 3 family members. They'd each love one of these, that whole kind of thing. Or even better, if you get to witness someone gifting one of your pieces to someone else and then they unwrap it and they have that reaction. That for me is like a core kind of moment of the, you know, a big thing. And unfortunately, I don't get to see it very often unless I'm
positive reinforcement.
The positive reinforcement of what you're making is reaching, you know, it's ticking a box for a wide group of people. It's not just for you. And that kind of stuff. So yeah, family, I've certainly found can be tricky. I mean, Heidi, you've already mentioned Ben. Have you ever asked him to critique your pieces?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we give it back and forth, but he's also like, "Let's go, babe." And then I have to like prod a little bit, like, "Well, what do you think of this? Like, do you like the color? Do you like the shape? Do you think it's too heavy?" You know, like I have to kind of engage him with a questionnaire basically. And that works out usually where, you know, he'll start to open up a little bit more and feel comfortable to kind of point out like, hey, you know, I think if you did this or you did that, like recently I did this Yosemite carving vase to mark our 15-year anniversary. And we had gone to Yosemite for our honeymoon. And I had taken one of the pictures that I had photographed when we were on our honeymoon and used that to carve into the side. And I wanted some feedback from him on the lid. Like, should it keep the lid? Should the lid go away? Is the lid an okay shape? I'm not really sure. I like the lid shape. Like, I want to have a pull at the top or a knob of some sort. Like, do you think it should be an animal? Do you think it should just be a shape? I was like, the feedback I'm getting online is like really mixed. Most people like the animal shape. Is that something you would like to help me with? Like, would you like to carve it? What kind of problems would we have here if we were to do something mixed media? And in that case, it was less of a ask for critique, but more of a problem solving session.
Yeah.
You know, but in the same regard, like you're still getting critique feedback. Like, oh yeah, I could see if maybe the lid, if you made it a little smaller and it didn't have a lip, like that might pull the piece a little bit more together. Or if we're trying to discover what kind of medium we want to do the knob in, like, let's talk about things that would complement the colors on the piece. Should it be something that's colorful? Should it be painted? Should it just be raw wood? Should it be organic shape? Should it be like round? You know, those kind of discussion points that leads you to the next phase of development. And, you know, it's not necessarily like, oh, we're going to scrap that version of the vase per se. We're going to enhance it. But if I were to revisit that same form or that same technique in the future, what things can I glean from this conversation to either duplicate what I did or improve upon what I did? Like, was there a technique? Was there a color? Was there, you know, something in the firing that, you know, could have improved it? But
okay, so that's interesting. So it moves it from moves it from that kind of critique and family feedback, as you said, to more of a problem-solving situation, which I think is definitely something that we would all go to peers about, wouldn't we? We would like, there's something that, you know, you feel like something's not quite there, or you can't quite figure out what something's missing. So that's where we might, like, you know, send a picture to each other, or ask a question, or jump on a hangout or whatever, and kind of, or if we're able to meet up physically and go, right, this is the thing. Now, how can we kind of analyze that and work on that? Okay. Yeah.
Even when I'm ideating, I'm reaching out to people that I think would be interested in what I'm making. So like my sister-in-law is really good at that, right? Because she's really into collecting glass.
Right.
So she knows all of these different like decanters and cups and plates and platters and all of that stuff. So she has kind of an eye for like what is really popular in that world. And so if I'm coming up with like a platter, and I kind of give her my sketchbook and I'm like, hey, you know, what do you think about these shapes? What do you think about this technique? Do you think that, you know, this would work? And she's able to come back and give me some pretty good feedback, even though she's family, you know, like she is, if you approach people in their space, like take away that maybe they don't have your aptitude, or they don't know your medium the way that you do, or whatever. Most people have a joy in something that you can pull them in to discuss on something you're working on, whether it's like they're really great at color cues, or they're really great at cooking. Like for me, all of my work is functional wear. So like if I'm making a set of canisters for the kitchen, like what size canister do you need for coffee? You know, what do you need for sugar? Do you want a wide mouth for salt? Do you want a skinny mouth for salt? Like what keeps really well? Does a butter bell work better than just a butter dish? Like, you know,
does a butter bell work better than just a butter dish?
Yeah, you know, the French butter bells.
Yeah, I do. I do. I was just thinking that's a t-shirt. Right there.
But I think, you know, if you're disappointed by the way that your family is reacting when you just present them with something, give them a cue for what you're presenting them with and what kind of response you want back, versus just, hey, you're my audience, what do you think? And I think you'd be less disappointed by the reactions if you kind of lead them along the path a little bit more.
I think context is everything, isn't it? Sorry, Rasmus.
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways of going about that. And I think that's, if you want to do sort of product development really well, I guess you need to sort of break down a product into its different properties, so to speak, and evaluate each of those separately. That doesn't mean the whole of it will come together perfectly, but if you have like a good idea of, I want this kind of thing, and then you go like you say, like, okay, but what size of spout is the best for this application? Okay, cool. Now I need to just make that work with this design. Yeah. Or how is the feel of it? How is the weight of it? How is the texture or the sanding or the surface finishing? Like, you can test all of those things separately, and then hope it comes together into one cohesive thing that, like, if you take the best of this, and best of this, like from the responses, then I guess I'm just reiterating how product development is done in the corporate world.
Yeah, that's my life.
I mean, I quite like the fact that you say, reaching out to people who are, have a certain thing. So a little while back, I wanted to make a small gift for our friend James from Molten Make, affectionately known as Dr. Multi. And he's very, very firmly a coffee aficionado, going from weighing the beans out before they make them type thing, that's fine, each their own. So I wanted, because I know that he and one of our other friends, Jan, had both been lamenting the fact that when you weigh them, the beans go everywhere if you don't pour them right, and if you haven't got the right vessel to put on your electric scales, which need to be hyper, accurate, etc. And so I just wanted to turn a small bowl to put on the scales for Dr. Multi, but I reached out to Jan because I wanted it to be a surprise. So I reached out to Jan and said, right, this is what I want to do, but I don't make coffee or own coffee beans. Like, what size of a pile is beans for one mug of coffee in the morning? Like what sort of quantity are we talking? And if I'm, and I turned a version and I sent a picture of it to him with dimensions, and he said, that's a great shape, but you probably want to make it a bit deeper or a bit wider, because otherwise, they like to bounce because they're beans, etc., etc. And so I was able to get some practical feedback from someone in that world that I have no knowledge of at all, and make a piece that James, I believe, was very happy with, and has used it at least once for the photograph that he sent me. And I would not be offended at all if he didn't use it daily and he kept it for special occasions, or if he'd forgotten he owned it. I totally understand. That's not the point. I was just happy that I was able to send him a gift of that kind of thing. But it certainly made a huge difference, rather than me going, oh, well, I'm just going to make this thing and that's what it's for. I've decided that's what it's for, but I've not asked anyone with any of that knowledge, or I've not done any of the research or any of that kind of thing. It would be like me trying to turn a coffee tamper and saying, oh, well, I'll just do it like 50 mil diameter, right? That'd be fine. But apparently there's a really specific diameter for the little thing that the bean paste or whatever it is in, so you'd have to make it that sort of size and whatever. I don't know. I take my coffee like a man. I bright. So very inside joke there for people looking it up. It's not rude at all. Please feel free to Google a bripe, BRIPE.
Multi has a
video all about that, actually. Yeah, and he's not sponsoring this episode, but he definitely deserves some shout outs.
He could be
following. Yeah, he could be, maybe. Yet another podcast shouting him out because he's a lovely person.
He's great.
So yeah, in that situation, that was invaluable information to get from someone, who was that kind of person, but also is again a creative person, so they could talk about some of the things that might be affected, rather than going to another friend of mine who's a coffee person but is a landscape gardener. So if I said to him, will this shape of bowl look good to put coffee in, he would probably have gone like, yeah, it looks great. And like it doesn't add the same context. So it certainly helps to provide people with the kind of background information. And if you don't feel that they've got the level of experience providing feedback, you can sort of say to them, this is the kind of thing I want to find out, is the shape right? Is this right? Is that right? Or whatever. And almost coach them, not into the answer, but to help you out and let you know. That's all of the asked for feedback section. One of the slight parts of that which can be handy as well is I taught a course a little while ago in my workshop for one person, and I would strongly encourage anyone, if you teach courses or if you do like a little taster session or something, it would be well worth doing some form of feedback form at the end of it that they can either email to you or handwrite while they're there. Because it is actually valuable for you going forwards. It can be awkward, it can feel awkward, and some people will just write, oh, it was amazing, tick, tick type thing. But it serves two purposes. One, you could potentially use those as quotes on your website or social media. And the second one is, like for my guy, I didn't ask him to fill out a feedback form, but I took note of a comment he made several times throughout the time I was in the workshop, which was that he found it quite cold in there. And he's a slightly older gentleman. I had the fire going, I had an all-filled radiator going, and I had layers on. But later in the day, because we don't move very much in there, he was quite cold. So if I wanted to teach in that space going forward, I would need to make sure that the heating was a lot more regulated in there, or make people well aware that it wasn't, so that they could wear layers and all of that kind of stuff. So worth taking into consideration that kind of asking for feedback as well. Unfortunately, because we make things and we are selling them, quite often you'll end up with some unasked for feedback as well. And this can take many different forms. It could be keyboard warriors commenting on social media posts that you've made and talking about how maybe your technique is wrong, or you're doing something dangerous, or you're wearing not the right type of clothing for whatever it is you're attempting to do. Or it can be face-to-face at a market. And they can not necessarily consciously be rude, but probably the most common ones would be people being surprised at pricing, or making comments along the lines of, well, I can make that myself. Which is what, actually, I've been talking too much, but I'll share this anecdote. My favorite thing that has happened at markets in this kind of regard is a husband and wife coming up to my stall at the beginning of the market and then coming back at the end of the market, and the wife buying like 2 or 3 pieces, and the husband stood there really grumpily and continuously telling her, well, I can make that for you, I can make that for you, until at the end she turned around and said, I've been asking you to make them for me for 4 years and you haven't. So I'm buying them from this guy. If you want to make me a replacement on your lathe, go ahead. But I need this for the kitchen. And just walking off. And I just kept my mouth shut. But it was that kind of, so that wasn't necessarily negative feedback, but it was that kind of attitude from the guy, not recognizing the fact that, yes, you could, but you haven't.
Right.
And so I've almost turned that into one of my responses to someone saying, oh, well, I could make that at home. And I've been sort of politely saying to them, yes, I'm sure you could, sir. Anyone can with a little bit of practice, but will you? Or the other one is, but you don't need to, sir, because I've saved you the time and effort. You could just buy that one.
Yep. That's a good
cheeky.
one.
It is cheeky, but the fact that they've stood in front of you, they're not looking at you, they're pretending you're invisible, and they're saying that kind of comment, then I feel it gives you the right to be a little bit cheeky back to them.
Yeah.
And just sort of say, hey, look, yeah, I totally get it. I'd either do it, put up or shut up, but in a politer way. But I'm sure you guys have had other experiences of similar sort of things. Heidi looks like she's keeping her mouth very tightly closed at this point in time.
I've had a lot, at least, of those of, oh, why should I buy this from you when I can just go to the hardware store and buy something similar for 1/10 of the price?
Yeah.
And I tell them, then you should go to the hardware store and buy it for 1/10 of the price. I'm not your supplier.
Yeah.
And they always get really surprised and why I'm not trying to make a sale. And it's like, no, you're not my customer. You don't see what I'm doing here.
This isn't a barter situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the keyboard warriors get me worse than the people in person. Because at least the people in person, like, I can just kill them with kindness, right? Like, I'm really good at that.
But you can also hear tone of voice and read body language.
Yeah. And usually when people say something like, oh, I could make that, or I used to do pottery and I don't know why your prices are so high, or, whatever else, like, usually because I come with truth, it's like, oh, well, the cost of doing what I'm doing it by myself, everything's in my home. XYZ. I could talk until I'm blue in the face. We all know that. But when it comes to you posting something, like, I'm insecure as it is with what I look like. We all are. With what I look like, and with posting videos of me talking or posting videos of me doing certain techniques. And what's always kind of in the back of my head is that I justify why other people are right and why I shouldn't be posting. And that is not a good place to be in for me, because it does not encourage me to continue to post things or continue to share my journey. in some cases it's been very, you get those sexualized comments, or you get those.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Do you?
No.
Oh, okay. I figured you would.
Out of the two of us, I'm surprised it's not him getting more of them than me. I'm not the one, stripped to the waist by a fire, oil pouring off me.
You're glistening.
Sorry, Heidi, we're
nicely.
glossing over an exceptionally important statement.
I mean, it's very uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Like, people can say anything that they want and hide behind a profile that may not be right, or may not actually be them, and it's very disheartening, especially if it comes from people within your maker community, whether it's the pottery community, or an adjacent community, just like general broad maker space. But I remember one time there was a criticism out there that was targeted at those of us that were female makers. Yeah. And we were all working very, very hard to showcase what we were doing, promote our crafts, promote other people trying it. And the response from a couple gentlemen, and they're not even gentlemen, they're dicks, in the community was, the only reason they're getting engagement is because of TNA.
Yeah.
And that really sparked a lot of discussion within a lot of community spaces, where it was like people justifying what he was saying. Like, her stuff, like, my stuff's just as good as hers, but she's getting more engagement, and it's only because she has tits. Yeah. And, in that regard, it's like, that's not appropriate. That's not appropriate criticism. That's not appropriate discussion. That's like, sure, maybe she is good looking, but also, like, there are men out there that are good looking too, and they're getting engagement. There are men that are not so good looking and getting a lot of engagement. Like, I guess, long story short, it's painful when you really are just looking at it and trying to be as good as you can be at what you're making. Share tricks and tips for how you're making things, and then people come at you for how you look, or they have this assumption that the only reason that you're doing what you're doing is because you're trying to get attention, you're an attention whore. Or when you're doing something in a masculine field, say it is wood turning, or say it is metalworking, or carpentry, where it's normally, like, typically men have been chased after for those roles, and women are starting to realize that they can do them.
Yeah.
Like, the response of, oh, she didn't actually do that, someone in the background did it for her, and then she just posed with the pictures.
Ruth Amos posted about that recently, didn't she?
Who did?
Ruth Amos from Kids Invent Stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she did a post quite recently about how the amount of times people say, oh yeah, but she didn't really weld that together and all this kind of stuff. And she's literally there welding things and flicking up the helmet and kind of going, how do I, there is physically no way of doing this without proving to you, because the people will say, oh, but that's all in an edit. That's, it's not real, or it's like you've CGI'd the welding spark or whatever. And I'm not going to try and walk into a subject that I am not going to ever be able to experience the negativity of being a female creative trying to make content, which I'm grateful for. But I also feel really quite sad that is a situation, and that some people will have. And I have no doubt that at least some point in the past, I've possibly even thought in a similar way. I've never written anything like that. I've never gone out of my way and written it down.
Just think about that. How many people are thinking that and not saying it out loud? And it only takes a few people to write it out, and then a few other people to give it the thumbs up.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. It's disheartening. It's not appropriate critique of the craft, but it is something that you face I think, it could be like if you're a marginalized person, say you're Black in a mostly white space, or you're transgender and you're in a space that, doesn't really understand what your life is like. Like I'm thinking about Mercury Stardust. She's building a community about like how to be a handy person, and teaching people how to fix their homes. And the feedback she's getting is like, there's a lot of, you're doing this. Like, look at you, look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then there's just enough people that are like coming down really hard that it's like, I don't know. I don't want this to turn into like a political conversation, but
let's take this. Let's take that completely, almost the opposite, right? And let's talk about someone who is a straight white male, Alex Steele, who, those of you who don't know, he is a YouTuber and social media guy. He's a blacksmith. He's originally from England. I'm not sure if he's currently living in the States or if he's moved back to the UK or whatever his situation is. He moved back to the
States a while back.
Yeah, but he is a straight white male. He is a young guy, and he's a blacksmith. And yet he has had a huge amount of criticism over the time. But I believe in his particular instance, I can't speak for everyone. I don't know the whole situation, but part of it was because he became really, really popular. He committed to posting a video like every day. He was creating a huge amount of content. He was getting interest from sponsors and whatever. And yet he wasn't necessarily as far along in his craft as some other people who were very, very good at their craft. They were on social media and YouTube, but not necessarily very committed to that or as good at that because they were committed to the craft side of it. So he was using social media as a tool to gain popularity, to generate income in order to fund himself to continue doing that lifestyle.
Right.
But I know from small groups that I've spoken to and from public stuff you've seen, got a lot of criticism. Okay, so if we take out that kind of, sexuality or political elements of it, and I'm not saying, oh, well, it happens to everyone, so it's lesser for that.
No.
Let's sort of use him as an example of taking that away. And Alec, if you ever listen to this, please don't take this the wrong way. This is not me attacking you at all. It's just discussing things that have been around. He is very publicly had a lot of that kind of negativity. And I would hate to be in a situation where every time I put up a piece of content, there was just piles of comments of negativity, or you're getting to a point where you feel you can't read the feedback because that most of it will be negative.
Was most of that like ageism and gatekeeping? Like you shouldn't be speaking about something that you're not.
There was a wide variety of kind of there was like, oh, you don't really know what you're talking about, you're too young, etc., or you're teaching poor technique, or you're doing things that are dangerous, a wide variety of things that I never really focused on, so I couldn't give the whole side of it. But I think a lot of people as well, not a lot of people, but I know a comment I saw quite often was about him being annoying. Because he's a very
high energy.
That's the words I was trying to think of. He was a very high energy person, which coming from an English person is not normal. So it looked quite kind of
juxtaposed
to what you would expect that kind of person to be. And so I think the point I was getting to is that if you put the effort in to get your content noticed by people, which is what content is for, is to be noticed by people, so that hopefully then the message behind the content gets to a wider audience. Naturally, if you work hard to get that pushed up, those of us around who are looking at that going, but I do that, or I do that better than they do, but what they haven't done is put the effort in or understood how to.
Oh gosh, you just circled it back.
Yeah.
Did you see what you did?
Yeah. then all of us end up, in that situation where it comes from a place of jealousy, it comes from a place of ignorance and misunderstanding as to why that kind of thing hasn't happened to us. And so we can comfortably sit there and be a keyboard warrior and say, and whether we feel brave enough to write that on someone's content or whether we just share it with friends or whatever else.
If I may, I would even argue a part of being successful is doing it so well it pisses people off.
Yeah, or frustrates people is possibly a better way of putting it. Because
I like to piss people off. That's what I am.
Well, we know that, Raz. Yeah, absolutely. No, you don't have to do that with how good you are. You just do that just as a standard.
That's the
Viking thing. Yeah. You didn't get the physique and like the 6-footness type thing. So you just kept that inherent kind of.
He has the physique.
He's no terrier, is he?
I saw him squatting and moving those bars of steel.
Saw him or deliberately stopped and watched him.
Yes, I've deliberately stopped and watched him 17 times.
Look at him go! You have to stop posting that kind of content. It's distracting. It's not required. I can't believe you did.
But you can't see it on OnlyFans. No, wait, no.
No. Not with the trousers
tossing rods around. That sounds really weird, really quickly.
Well, that got derailed from the nicely circled back point nicely, didn't it? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I think the long and the short of it is the negativity comment of it. Unfortunately, as humans, that's what we'll focus on to. And as creative people, because we are inherently self-conscious and kind of, to a certain extent, putting things out there to go, please love me.
And
then when people don't, that can be very crushing.
I still want to go back to the whole point of if you a part of success is that actually some people will be pissed off or annoyed or hate what you're doing.
Yep.
And that can be even more polarizing if you are inside of a really deep niche. Like if you have a really narrow target audience, and you're nailing that target audience, probably no one outside of that target audience will understand what you're doing. Just because of how narrow your focus is. So that means if you're doing that really, really well, a lot of other people will not get it. They will be annoyed. They will be frustrated. They will be jealous about the success you're having in a field that they maybe don't know anything about. So I think it's also part of this of the negative feedback is valuable if it is delivered in the right way. But people just shouting at their screens is not ever really valuable.
No.
Other than maybe saying, I'm doing something right because they have a lot of emotions about what I'm doing. If nothing else, it is engagement.
So I'll give this one to everyone for free. Okay. I was at a market a couple of years ago and I was with a bunch of people I knew relatively well. It was a 3-day event and I was stood between two stall holders, and out of the blue, I'd kind of seen this guy's wife in the background and muttering to each other. This guy walked up to my stand and he pointed at different items and he said, I can make that in 12 minutes. I can make that in 10 minutes and I can make that in like whatever. And I looked at him and said, good for you. Well done. And he walked off and the ladies either side of me were literally getting ready to go out from behind their tables to go and grab him and chastise him for like being rude. And they said, how are you so calm? And I said, it's really simple. He's an older guy. He's going to be dead soon. Okay. And as stupid and as like twisted as that might sound, right? If you think about it from this point of view, does what that person have any direct effect on you whatsoever and on your life? And the answer is no. Okay. No. Don't get me wrong. If it's someone in their 20s, it's a bit difficult to say. But if you think of it in that manner, not that you're going to go and cause any violence towards them, but if you just think of it that manner, say, hey, do you know what? It doesn't matter. Their life may be over soon. If that's the way that bigs them up, great. That's up to them. Just they're dead to you. They're gone from your life. You will probably never see them again. All right. And it's genuinely, it's provided a great anecdote for me that has made people laugh.
I love it.
And so for me, that's been more valuable than anything. There's no point standing there brooding and going, he doesn't understand or whatever. It's not worth it. And I'm fortunate that I'm able to kind of have that capacity to do that. But it is something that all of us can manage to do. A lot easier when you've got people around you and you can have that interaction.
Oh man,
stood on your own. But anyway, I think this has been a great session. Heidi's got to run away and go and do adult things. Adulting is a horrible, horrible curse on all of us. But she does have to go. So hopefully everyone has enjoyed this episode. If you have enjoyed this episode, tell your friends about it. Crafty or not, makers or not, tell them to listen to the podcast, please. It is the best way to get the message out because I'm atrocious at our social media and it's got a small following anyway. So please tell people about it, and it will help the podcast to grow and help us to bring it forward and to keep going. You can find us on social media, Setting Up Shop, setting_up_shop, shop spelled SHOPPE, or info@settingupshop.com. Please send us an email, thoughts, questions, or feedback. We would love to hear your feedback. That would be great. DM us, or you can get hold of us personally. I am on tarrant.co.uk on Instagram and on Facebook and all of that kind of stuff. Rasmus is at Rasmus Loen, Loen, and Heidi is at Whitehall Pottery. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. We will hopefully be able to talk to you again, maybe one day with you as a live studio audience.
That'd be great.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.